There is a moment, just one, in which even the most cynical, most broken man, the one accustomed to bargaining with demons, falls silent. Not because he has no words, but because he understands that nothing more can be said. Before him, the fires of hell do not burn like they do in books. They burn like an open wound in the air. Reality trembles, shadows bend, and Constantine's own soul, that thing he always treated as a joke, feels heavy, real, inevitable. He who has spent his life mocking death now stands before the one debt he could never cancel. And yet, he smiles, not out of bravery, but because he understands that, in the end, even losing can be a form of victory. That moment is defined not by action, but by the silence surrounding it. Souls watch him, demons demand him, and angels, those bureaucrats of heaven, remain impassive, unable to decide whether they face a sinner or a martyr. And Constantine, exhausted, lighting his last cigarette with trembling hands, murmurs something no one else hears. Perhaps an insult, perhaps a prayer. And in that ambiguity lies his entire story. A man who made sin an art and redemption a private joke. But before reaching that point, before the tobacco smoke blended with the breath of hell, there was a boy. A boy born in Liverpool in a home without light. A boy to whom life never gave permission to be innocent. His mother died giving birth to him, and his father, incapable of love or forgiveness, blamed him for it. Little John grew up surrounded by silence, broken screams, and promises that were never kept. He quickly learned that the world was not divided between good and evil, but between those who had power and those who did not. Between those who could pretend everything was fine and those who saw the cracks in the facade. Perhaps that is why he sought refuge in the occult, in what others feared to look at. When reality becomes unbearable, many retreat into dreams. John retreated into demons. He learned that invisible doors exist where madness sneaks in, disguised as magic. That the forbidden is not always evil, and the sacred can be cruel. In the damp alleys of England, among dusty books and improvised rituals, he began forging the legend of the man who would outwit hell. But no one cheats hell without paying a price. His youth was a chain of mistakes that weighed like curses. He constantly sought to redeem the emptiness of his childhood through control, believing that if he understood the universe's secrets, he could fix what was broken inside him. Then came Newcastle, a name that would mean nothing to anyone else, but to him, it echoed his damnation. There, alongside a group of friends and amateur magicians, he tried to save a possessed girl. He wanted to be the hero, the savior, but hell does not forgive arrogance. The girl Astra was dragged into the depths before his eyes, and John, powerless, understood what true terror was. Not that of demons, but of living knowing that your hands killed what you most wanted to protect. From that moment on, his life became a labyrinth of guilt and cynicism. He drank to forget, smoked to stay sane, and laughed at everything to keep from crying. And whenever the world fell apart, he was there, fixing it with tape, blood, and sarcasm. Not out of heroism, but because he knew that if he didn't do it, no one else would. It's worth pausing here, because behind the myth of the cynical magician in a wrinkled suit lies something we all know, even if we call it by different names. That voice that tells us we don't deserve to be saved. That shadow that follows us, reminding us that our mistakes don't vanish just because they no longer hurt. Constantine doesn't fight external demons, he fights his own. Those that whisper to him that every act of kindness is a lie, every victory temporary, that the world doesn't change and neither can he. And yet he persists, because sometimes resistance is not about faith, but stubbornness.
In London, where neon lights hide more lost souls than stars, Constantine became an almost mythological figure. A man who could face the supernatural and survive, though never unscathed. Wizards avoided him, demons hated him, and angels tolerated him reluctantly. His reputation was that of a lucky bastard, a trickster who always found a way out. But the truth was harsher. Every victory left invisible scars, and every soul he saved became a reminder of those he could not. Time did not soften him. It made him sharper, wearier, more dangerous. He realized that heaven and hell were not opposites, but reflections of the same corrupt system. That God and Lucifer played chess with souls, and humans were the pieces broken in every game. So he decided not to play. Or rather, he decided to be the piece that moves itself. That decision made him a celestial outcast. No one trusted him, and he trusted no one. But it's curious. Broken men attract the desperate, and so John surrounded himself with others like him, people who had seen too much, yet still sought a spark of meaning. They didn't say it, but they needed it. Deep down, all of them did, because even the most cynical man needs to believe there is something beyond chaos. And here enters a reflection that runs through his entire life. What is good when everything is tainted? What does it mean to save someone if, in doing so, you condemn another? Constantine was never a saint, but he understood a truth few accept. Sometimes the lesser evil is still evil. And yet he chose to bear it, not for redemption, but out of habit, because someone had to get their hands dirty. Over the years, his body began to reflect what his soul had been screaming for a long time. The cough grew stronger, his skin paler, his days wearier. Lung cancer was the final reminder that hell doesn't always need fire to claim you. And when the doctors sentenced him, he laughed, as always, because he knew death would be just another negotiation. And it was. Constantine did not die, at least not the way he was supposed to. He tricked heaven and hell at the same time, selling his soul to 3 different infernal lords, provoking a conflict so great that none could claim him. Instead of burning, he survived, not because he was immortal, but because his life had become too inconvenient even for hell. And perhaps that was his greatest victory, being so unbearable that not even the devil wanted him. But even in that victory, there is sadness, because every time he cheated death, he lost a piece of himself. His humanity gradually crumbled, replaced by a kind of eternal fatigue. And yet he kept fighting, not out of faith, but out of habit, not out of hope, but out of defiance. Sometimes, when night fell over London, and the smoke from his cigarette mingled with the fog, a different shadow could be seen in his eyes, something like melancholy. Perhaps he thought of Astra, perhaps of friends he had lost, or of the times love slipped through his fingers. Because yes, he loved too, even if he never knew how to hold it. Love, for him, was another form of dangerous magic, powerful, unpredictable, and always with a cost he was unwilling to pay.
And here we must pause again, because although his story is full of demons, pacts, and dark miracles, what truly defines it is something simpler: the impossibility of escaping oneself. We all, at some point, confront that unforgiving mirror, that moment when we understand that no spell or promise can erase what we were. Constantine lived in that mirror all his life, and perhaps that is why he understood the suffering of others so well, because his own never abandoned him. They say the line between hero and condemned is so thin that sometimes even death cannot distinguish them. Constantine walked that line throughout his existence, neither entirely human nor wholly cursed, a man who had learned to survive at the cost of losing himself. And each time he looked back, he only found the remnants of what was once a soul.
After cheating hell and walking away alive, something changed in him. It was not relief, it was emptiness. The kind of emptiness that arrives when you realize there is nothing left to fear, because the worst has already happened. He moved through London like a ghost with a license to smoke. The streets knew him, the bars awaited him, demons hated him, and angels watched from afar, as one might observe a mistake they cannot fix. And yet he continued, not because he wanted to live, but because he didn't know how to stop. His life became a succession of lost causes, curses to undo, spirits to exorcise, portals to seal. He did it with the same disdain one pays an old debt, but behind the sarcasm was something that never fully extinguished, a spark of compassion. That dirty, tired compassion born not of hope, but from recognizing pain. Constantine helped because he knew what it was to be broken, and even if he denied it, that was his most human act. Sometimes he was accompanied by others. Zatanna, the stage magician who had also seen too much. Chas, his loyal friend, who endured years of ridicule and danger without asking for anything in return. They kept him anchored to reality, reminding him that there was still something beyond smoke and shadows. But even those bonds were doomed to break, because closeness was a luxury John could not afford. Every person who loved him ended up hurt or worse. So he learned to distance himself before seeing them fall, because love in his life always came with a bill. And yet, there are moments that even the most skeptical cannot resist. There was a time when heaven itself asked for his help, an imminent war between angels and demons, a rift threatening to consume the balance of the world. And there he was, the outcast, the one no deity wanted to claim. Ironic, isn't it? The same man who had insulted God and cheated the devil, now the only one capable of preventing both of them from destroying the earth. But that is Constantine's fate, to be the savior no one wants and the culprit of every victory. He succeeded, of course, he always did, but each triumph left a bitter taste, as if the universe mocked his effort. Heaven remained indifferent, hell still hungry, and humanity barely remembered his name. There is something profoundly human in that, in giving everything for a world that doesn't even know you exist, and continuing to fight, even knowing that nothing will change. It's what we all do, to some degree or another. We get up, we try, we stumble, we keep going. Not because we believe life is fair, but because sometimes the only thing left is to keep walking, even when there is no destination.
Constantine understood that better than anyone, and in some way he accepted it. In his cynicism, there was a strange kind of faith, not in God, but in the simple act of enduring. Because if heaven and hell were so obsessed with the human soul, there must be something in it worth fighting for, something that neither angels nor demons could comprehend. And this is where his story becomes quieter, more introspective, because the external battles stopped mattering so much. What truly haunted him was inside, the memories of Newcastle, the faces of those he lost, the echo of choices he could never undo. There is a scene written in no book, yet one that could summarize his entire life. John sitting in an empty church, staring at a dust-covered crucifix. He does not pray, he does not ask. He just looks, and for a moment it seems he understands, that he comprehends that faith is not a bargain or a promise, but a way to stay standing when there is no reason to do so. That is Constantine's true miracle. Not the spells, not the pacts, not the exorcisms, but his persistence, his ability to rise again and again, even when each fall tears another piece of his soul away. In that he is like all of us, like those who keep trying to love despite being hurt, like those who believe even when everything tells them it's not worth it, like those who keep breathing amidst the smoke. Over the years, he grew more bitter, but also wiser. He learned that magic was only an excuse to speak about what truly matters, the power of choices. Every spell was a metaphor, every demon a reflection. And beyond all the darkness, there was always that simple, brutal idea. We all carry our own curses, and the only thing that saves us is what we choose to do with them. But the world does not leave those who understand it too well in peace. And when Hell returned to claim what it thought was its own, Constantine had to do what he did best: lie to death. Once again, this time not for himself, but for someone else. Because deep down, no matter how hard he denied it, John always had a protective instinct. Not of a hero, but of an older brother to a world falling apart. And this is where his story becomes almost tragic. Because every time he saved a life, another was lost. Every time he closed a door to hell, a window to heaven sealed as well. It was as if the universe insisted on reminding him that balance always comes at a cost. But he accepted it, because he no longer sought to win, only to endure a little longer. Sometimes I think Constantine is the perfect representation of that human contradiction we all carry inside. The need to believe even when we know all is lost. That stubbornness to keep lighting matches in the middle of a storm. He knew he could not change the system nor erase his sins, yet he still refused to let the darkness consume him completely. Because as long as a spark remained, even a single one, there was something worth fighting for. And that spark was him. There is a hidden beauty in his tragedy, in knowing that even with all his irony, his disdain, and his rage, Constantine never stopped trying to do what was right. In his own way, yes, dirty, unpredictable, cynical, but he tried. And that is what makes him so human, not his powers, nor his wit, but his inability to fully give up. Sometimes, amidst the smoke, he could be heard murmuring something almost inaudible, a sort of prayer or perhaps an apology. No one knew to whom it was directed, perhaps to the dead, perhaps to himself. But in that tired voice, there was a tenderness the world never allowed him to show.
There is a kind of silence known only to men who have seen too much. It is not the absence of noise, but a deep pause, a crack between two breaths where the soul seems to observe itself. John Constantine lived in that silence, not in moments of glory, nor in battles with demons, but in the moments afterward, when the smoke clears and the weight of what he did and what he didn't falls again upon his shoulders. He had seen friends die, love lost, and betrayed everyone who had once trusted him. And yet, he continued, not out of hope, but because stopping would be admitting that nothing he did had meaning, and that, for him, would be the worst punishment. Over the years, his power grew, but his purpose blurred. He could see the dead, speak with angels, walk among the shadows of the beyond. But every miracle tasted like ash, because deep down he knew, the more he understood the gears of the universe, the more absurd everything seemed. Heaven and hell were just extremes of the same cruel machine, a factory of faith and suffering, where souls were the currency. And he, a simple man trapped in the middle, was as close as it got to a glitch in that system, an error that refused to be erased. One night, as the London rain fell like an endless confession, Constantine saw himself reflected in the window of a closed bar. At first, he didn't recognize himself. The wrinkled suit, the weary gaze, the lines on his face like scars from a war that appeared in no book. In that reflection, he saw the man he had always feared becoming, someone who had lost everything trying to save something that perhaps never existed. But just as melancholy seemed ready to devour him, a small smile crossed his face, an ironic, almost tender smile, because in that reflection he understood something. It was not about winning, not even about being remembered. It was about enduring long enough to give the world one more day. and perhaps that is the most heroic thing a human being can do. That idea accompanied him in his final years, the silent weight of continuing to exist, of being the invisible guardian of a world that didn't even know it was in danger. There were moments when he wanted to give up, moments when he questioned whether it was worth carrying a destiny he never asked for. But he always found an excuse to stay. Sometimes a lost soul, sometimes a minor cause, other times simply the bitter taste of a cigarette that kept him tethered to the real world. Because deep down, Constantine loved this world. He never said it, never admitted it, but he loved it. Loved its flaws, its contradictions, its absurd way of keeping on spinning even when everything seemed on the verge of collapse. And perhaps, deep down, that was his greatest redemption, choosing life in the midst of death. The twilight of John Constantine was not a grand battle nor a celestial prophecy. It was an accumulation of weariness. The body that once defied gods began to surrender. The cough became constant, his skin paler, his dreams heavier. There were no enemies to face, only memory. Yet, even in that decay, there was beauty, because he faced it standing, as always, without pleas, without easy redemption, without hope, but with dignity. One night, in an empty room lit only by a broken lamp, Constantine wrote something on a crumpled piece of paper. No one knows exactly what it said, but rumor has it those were his last words. Perhaps a joke, perhaps a confession. The truth is, when they found him, his body was still, his face serene, and a cigarette extinguished between his fingers, as if finally he had found something resembling peace. But of course, nothing with Constantine is so simple. Death did not claim him completely. Neither heaven nor hell wanted to take his soul, perhaps because both knew they could not control it. So his spirit remained in limbo, walking between worlds as he always had, mocking everyone, laughing under his breath, looking for a bar that still served cheap whiskey and a corner to smoke without being disturbed. And there, in that corner of the universe where neither saints nor demons dare to enter, John Constantine still exists, not as a vengeful specter, but as a presence, a warning, a shadow that whispers to those who dare challenge the darkness, "Be careful what you wish for," because hell is always listening.
But if you listen closely, between the irony and the smoke, there is something else in his voice. Something like tenderness, an almost imperceptible echo saying, "Still, try." Because that is, in the end, his true lesson. That life does not need purity to have value. That it is not about being saints or heroes, but about continuing to push the light forward, even with stained hands. Constantine reminds us that we are all a little like him, imperfect creatures trying to do what is right in a world that rarely rewards goodness, and that redemption is not a place, but a direction. When one looks at his entire story, the broken childhood, the hell in Newcastle, the losses, the hollow victories, the resurrections, one realizes it is not the story of a magician or an exorcist. It is the story of a man who learned to coexist with his demons and in the process to understand ours. His magic was never in the spells, but in his ability to stare into the abyss and say, "Not today." Perhaps that is why he remains such a human figure, because beyond mysticism and prophecy, Constantine is the metaphor for what we all face, that unstable balance between light and shadow, between guilt and the desire to be better. And although his life may seem like a parade of tragedies,
deep down there is a hidden hope. The idea that even those who have fallen can keep walking. At some point, one wonders if his story had meaning, if so much struggle, so much pain, so much sacrifice was worth anything. And perhaps the answer is yes, but not in the way we usually seek, because it is not about winning, but about continuing to endure, about understanding that redemption is not erasing what we did, but learning to live with it. Constantine did not find paradise, but he found something far more real, the peace of knowing he was human. And that peace, brief as it was enough. Imagine that final moment, the city asleep, smoke rising slowly, the distant hum of traffic mingling with the rain, and him sitting in the shadows, eyes fixed on the void as if waiting for an answer that will never come. And perhaps, just perhaps, he allows himself one last smile, not out of pride nor defiance, but understanding. Because in the end, even the damned can be free, if only for a moment. And in that moment, John Constantine ceases to be a name, ceases to be a story. He becomes a symbol, the embodiment of something we have all felt, the desire not to give up, to keep lighting a flame even when the wind blows against you.
Perhaps that is why, when someone somewhere in the midst of despair lights a cigarette and whispers a curse to defy fate, a shadow smiles from some invisible corner of the world. And even if no one sees it, we all feel it. Because as long as darkness exists, there will be a man with a lighter in his pocket, ready to outsmart it once more. And his name will be John Constantine. If you've made it this far, tell me, how many times have you felt like you're fighting your own demons, just like Constantine? How many times have you sparked your own flame in the middle of darkness? If this story touched you, if it made you think or feel even a little, support me with a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next stories where we explore those characters who, like you and me, keep searching for meaning amid the chaos. Leave me a comment about what you learned from John Constantine, or if you've ever, like him, had to stare into the abyss and say, "Not today." See you in the next video. Until then, may your fire never go out.